He actually exercised the theater. And when we were interviewing, I am not kidding.
Yeah.
We're in the room and we're doing all the interviews,
The celebrity
talent,
interviews in
all
the
that stuff,
hospitality suite.
all day, all night. He comes into the room and all of a sudden all the lights are flickering. Okay. And
Video
the
card
sound mixer dies a couple, 10 minutes later. Can't stop the flickering. And the digital thing they put in the camera to tape and so on, corrupted. He says, out of nowhere, he says, I know what this is. He takes out his book. He gets out he does his thing.
He puts his
stands against the window. We're 5 floors up, and he starts chanting in Latin and saying the prayers in Latin. He's exercising the room. And the bottom line is, from behind him, a female voice is speaking and chanting in the demonic tongue in his ear. And he basically what was the phrase that he got to? He's speaking in Latin.
He gets to the part of the Latin rite that says, "Bow now before the great and terrible name of Jesus."
And everything flickering stopped, everything worked, and the voice is gone. Now you can say,
now, by the way, subsequently, when that hard drive came back to LA, it had been mysteriously erased. And the give you an example, our Newsweek interview, they had to take 3 times. That recorder was 3,000 miles from us. It wouldn't function. And it seemed like it was working just fine.
Every day we deal with dozens. It's crazy. It's insane. But people still insist on believing there is no God, there is no devil, and I have nothing to worry about. Pretty scary.
Yeah, even in the publishing space, there are kind of the urban legends in our industry, but some of the most popular books talking about demons and in this space, if you talk to the editors who worked on those, they have stories about Word files corrupting and people having to pray over hard drives and workstations, and then after they prayed, all of a sudden the entire manuscript just mysteriously came back, even though it was gone 5 minutes ago. And yeah, it's like there's a plot against all this stuff. It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, dig into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guests are Cary Solomon and Chuck Konzelman, and we're going to be talking about their brand new film, Nefarious. Cary, Chuck, it is truly an honor. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
For having us on.
Yeah.
Well, truly my pleasure. I got to sit down and watch the film. I watched it twice. I was totally blown away, and we're going to get into the film in a few moments here. But before, I'd love to give you gentlemen just a moment to introduce yourselves. So think of this as you're giving us the elevator pitch of the Cary and Chuck origin story. Give us a little bit about each of you, and how did you guys come together to start working on films?
We grew up together. My mom and dad got divorced when I was a young boy. I moved out to Jersey. He was the kid next door, and boom, there it was. From there it was all downhill.
I should have run screaming.
And, one day we just decided to go make movies, and we write, we produce, we direct. We did God's Not Dead. We did the movie Unplanned. We've done a lot of stuff, and now Nefarious.
And in terms of this film, it looks like the inspiration for this was what is it? Steve Dease's book, A Nefarious Plot. How do we go from kind of that story, that novel, into a film adaptation? How'd that get started?
I think, like a lot of folks in Hollywood, we always, we thought about, like, what would a Screw Tape Letters type movie look like? What would it look like with less humor and contemporary, more of a mature version? And Steve did a book called A Nefarious Plot, which didn't have a story. It was kind of almost a series of theological plus conservative sermons, for lack of a better term. It was framed as the rants of a demon talking about how he took down Western civilization and how he did it. But there wasn't a story. There wasn't even a second character per se. But we liked that character. Steve came to us. We read the book and we said, you know what? We've extremely hard to write the adversary directly as a character in a film. I don't want to climb in that headspace. But to talk about using one of his lieutenants to pull them in as a character, that gave us some purchase there. So the book became the inspiration for the film, and Steve's been great. Steve's usually the smartest guy in any room he goes into. So he's been extremely helpful.
And the one thing I kept thinking about, and I had mentioned this to both of you before we got into the interview, is I'm curious who consulted or gave you input on the script, because I've probably read 12 to 15 Catholic exorcism and deliverance books this past year, interviewed a bunch of different priests. Richard Gallagher's book, Forbidden Foes, is phenomenal, looking at things from a psychologist perspective of whether somebody's demonized or they're having mental issues. Were there any key voices that spoke into this? Because again, how the dialogue plays out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is literally perfect. I was just blown away again.
Well, the way we look at it is this: we're two guys from Jersey, so that dialogue wasn't us. That was the Holy Spirit, because we can't go there. But we felt God inspired. We resisted, and we kept being brought back to it. The Lord in prayer basically pushed us forward. Of course, we are devout believers. We deeply believe in the Lord. This is our ministry. This is not a job. We get paid to do it, which is, it's a gift from the Lord, really, to do this kind of thing. So when we do any subject, it could be a Western. We go fully in and study everything that's there. And of course, there are exorcists, Father Ripperger, Father Carlos Martins, who's the premier exorcist probably in the United States.
Some of the stuff, goes all the way back to the most interesting lecture I ever went to in college was by the Jesuit who was the technical consultant on The Exorcist. And he was a professional. That was his profession. He was an exorcist. And some of the stuff he was talking about was just, and what was really interesting was, and this is a consistent note I'm seeing among the priests who are exorcists, they're so grounded. They tend to be so quiet. A lot of them have the demeanor of law professors or scholars.
Very true.
It's just like they go do this thing. They do this crazy thing for a living. But there are rules. Demons are very legalistic. There's a process that they go through. And just so much of it is identification and recognition for them. And then just reversing where the demon has traditionally always painted the victim into a corner, the possessed, the priest or the exorcist going in is doing the exact same thing in reverse, painting them into the corner where they will be subject to the full authority of Jesus Christ and ultimately driven from the possessed.
And you mentioned Father Carlos Martins. If folks watching this or listening to this haven't checked out the Exorcist Files podcast, it's phenomenal. The stories are acted out. It's kind of like getting to listen to old time radio, if you will. And so it's a little scary at times. But again, if you haven't checked that out, highly recommend that show. Talk to us a little bit about the Oklahoma State Reformatory. How much of the film did you guys do there? I know you had to build some sets and such as well. And does it have kind of a jaded past? Were you filming in a haunted prison?
Yeah, it was definitely a trip. First of all, it's in a town called Granite, and it is basically granite. If you're not a prisoner or a guard, you don't live in Granite.
The town of Granite is a population of 1,700, half of whom are incarcerated.
Right.
So that's the town. So, and at one time, several decades ago, it was actually the most dangerous prison in the United States. When it was an open yard prison, they had more murders per capita than any prison in the United States. And our tour guide on the Scout was the chief of the guards who'd been there for 45 years. So he's like, we're going through the guards, like, yeah, here's where I saw my first murder. Here's the escape attempt that did this and that. But yeah, he explained some of the freaky stuff that was going on. Some of the things that have no earthly explanation. And apparently, when they break in a new guard, when a new hire happens and they're doing the night tour, sometimes they forget to give them a heads up not to see anything. And if they don't give them the heads up, there's an old wing that's been abandoned for decades. A lot of times they will see a light on and a shower running. And so the new guard will comment on that. Well, the problem is that there's been no electricity and no water to that wing in 30 plus years, but now they have an incident. And when you have an incident, now you have to go all the way down there and look at where this was just occurring. So they try to take care of that.
They have all kinds of problems there. They hear constant sweeping on the floor, hundreds of men snoring, and there's no one in that wing. 2
or 3 a.m. They said, look, you stand in the courtyard, you look at the old cell block, and you will hear the sound of several hundred men, heavy breathing and some snoring.
So it's a crazy. I have
no explanation for it.
It's a crazy place. We were there 3 days, actually. People think we shot the whole movie there, but we didn't need to do that. The long shots in the hallways and stuff. But we then constructed a humongous set for the one-on-one.
A realistic enough set. It was 32 feet tall. It was 50 feet across for the main hero set. There were guard walkways and such. And one of the security guards at the studio where we were working was a former prison guard. He said, guys, I go inside your set, I get a little bit of PTSD. This is not a pleasant experience. You're a little too realistic. So if we did our job right, or more importantly, if the production designer did his job right, and I believe he did, you can't tell where the real prison leaves off and our set begins.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely seemed consistent and fluid throughout your transitions. And interesting that kind of the phenomenon that happens there is in kind of that 2 to 3 in the morning, kind of the witching hour, so to speak, when people say that is when demonic or paranormal activity, if it's going to happen, that's likely when it's going to occur in those wee hours of the morning. Let's talk a little bit about some of the folks that you cast for the key roles. Talk to us about Sean Patrick Flannery as Nefarious. What did it look like to, I guess first, like, what were the qualities you were looking for in somebody to play this character? It's a very, very complex role to pull off in the film.
We had basically done work with Shaun about 15 years ago when we were just starting out. And so we shot a little movie for $250,000. And Shaun basically said yes to the role because we had written a role and he loved the role, which you don't get a guy like Sean Patrick Flannery. I mean, he's young Indiana Jones, Boondock Saints. I mean, this guy's a pro, but he knocked our socks off. I mean, it was single-handedly. We had no idea how, we couldn't even turn the camera on. Okay. So it was like, okay. And Shaun just took us through it. So we always knew
he has a skill set. We've worked with a lot of actors. He actually has the best skill set.
He's amazing.
Of any actor we've ever worked with, bar none, or seen work, bar none. He just has another gear he can go to. And it's actually, I believe, tremendously underappreciated by Hollywood. I think they may change after this because they're going to get a chance to see him. I mean, we had the chairman emeritus of one of the big 3 theater chains in the United States saw our version of the film once as soon as it was done. Actually, slightly before it was done, but he saw Shaun's performance and he said, "This is a dark, heavy masterpiece." And he was just
he thought he was better than Anthony Hopkins. But Shaun is, without a doubt, the best actor that we've ever worked with. But I will tell you that I just don't think there was anyone else that could do this role. I think Shaun is the best actor in Hollywood, and he's the most unknown, underrated actor because Hollywood, they tend to nepotize. They tend to only hire the people they like. And so if you don't stand in line with them, then you get banished, you get canceled. So, but I think that this role will make Shaun hot again. And I think also Jordan, who sat across him the whole time, he was on Entourage, and it was mysterious how we didn't have that other role. Jordan was like the last person that we needed to cast, and all of a sudden on my screen I see this guy, and I'm like, "Where's this from?" You got to remember, when you're casting, you see hundreds of people. He's on the screen, and I say, he looks like a psychiatrist. He smells like a psychiatrist, right? I mean, okay, now hopefully he can speak English and that he doesn't dribble,
Boys, let's see if he can hang in there. This is going to be a rough ride.
And so, we saw his footage and stuff, and we just both, I had a feeling.
So the first day of filming, so I'll give you a look at, to borrow from Bismarck, those with a fondness for sausages and movies should not watch them being made. So first day of filming at the prison, we're there in the morning. We're waiting for sunup to be high enough to start shooting. Our first incident is that our meeting coincides with the annual meeting of the prison board. And we've got protesters in the movie at the gate, and they think there's a full-blown riot in progress. So the facility gets shut down for 90 minutes, but okay. Next stop along the line is Jordan is in his trailer. He's in wardrobe. He comes out, and he says, I just had my first child, a son. I'm a father. And this had happened.
Let me just explain what that does to you as a director and the producer. Uh-oh. I mean, it's a big uh-oh, because morally, what am I going to say to him? Don't go home to your wife and your child. But we can't do that because we're going to collapse. So, but we loved on him, and he turned and he looked at us. We didn't say a word to him. This is the kind of guy he is. He said, "Listen, I want you to know I'm here. I spoke to my wife. I'm not going anywhere. I feel this is important work, and I will. Let's roll." And 20 seconds later, him and Shaun ripped off 12 pages, 15 pages of a scene to start the movie in a row. And by the way, Shaun is dyslexic. So it's an amazing.
He memorizes everything word for word.
It's unbelievable.
His ability is incredible.
And they were great bouncing off each other. It was great. They had a synergy.
Well, and I agree. Jordan is completely believable as a psychiatrist. It looked like that's what he was born to do in this life. In terms of Shaun and like kind of the facial tics and the body movements, was there any kind of coaching or inspiration for that? Again, just it was very believable that he was coming across as somebody manifesting a demon, where just the movements are kind of odd and sometimes weirdly exaggerated. And any coaching go into that from you guys?
We knew he was capable of that because we'd seen that before, and we encouraged him to bring it. And he also he has the ability to master a stutter to produce, and we then took both of the actors and we did the thing that horrifies an editor and drives our sound guy crazy, but we said, feel free to step on each other's dialogue.
Just like we're doing now to you. So, I mean, it's one of those things, but
but it adds intensity and realism. And that's part of the sense of this is really taking place. The whole goal was to take this movie, and the audience became the unseen third person at the table involved in the conversation.
But, Shaun's been in the business for a long time. So you go to him and you said, I want you to do this and I want you to do that. And he'll smile at you and say yes, and then go do it his own way anyway.
And you like his way better. That's right. The good part of it.
So you say, yeah, I did that, and you take all the credit. But the bottom line is all Shaun.
Once that happened, we had to do almost nothing. It reminded me of there's a beautiful story about the old movie, The Man Who Would Be King, and they had Sean Connery and Michael Caine. Michael Caine had to wait 4 days for his first bit of direction from the director. And he said, that's it after 4 days. And the director said, John Huston said, if you cast it right, there's not a lot to do. And that's what it was in this case.
That's what we did.
We constructed a world where they could play and then guarded it so that they could keep playing. And that's where the magic took place.
Right.
Well, and I was just amazed watching the film that so much of it just takes place with them across the table from each other. You don't actually have a ton of characters in the film. And I was like, what a well-constructed story that you could hold my attention for almost 2 hours with literally mostly two guys across the table from each other. Just an amazing dialogue that you can't help but be completely drawn into. Talk to us a little bit about Daniel Martin Berkey's character, Father Lewis. He was an interesting gave us a little break with the two main characters for a moment. What was that character bringing into the film? Because I'm assuming he was a Catholic priest because he's father, but he's a guy who believes demons aren't necessarily real, and this is just kind of a psychic break, or things that we just think are real because we've seen him in too many kind of books and movies. What were you trying to introduce with that character?
I think when we found him, first of all, again, he looked perfect. He smelled the part, okay? I mean, he had the voice, the whole thing. Yeah. And we said, this is our guy. If he can act, there's a gift. So, but realistically, when we were creating the script, we knew we had to confront the church issue. Why didn't they bring a priest into an exorcism? So we said, okay, we have this problem. If we're going to do a battle here and this is a power priest, then, the demon's going to be rebuked and leave, and, there's no movie. So we also looked at what the church is like today in a lot of cases. This is evangelical, this is Catholic, this is all the churches. They've backed away from pronouncing evil as evil. And in a lot of cases, now there's a lot of great priests, there's a lot of great pastors, there's a lot of great priests and pastors out there. So I'm not saying that, but we wanted to get a guy who was a progressive, a liberal progressive, who basically just doesn't believe in anything. Really, he shouldn't be a priest. So if you watch carefully, when he comes in, Shaun steps away from the table in fear. And then all of a sudden, once the guy says, oh, we don't believe in that kind of thing, it's about love and it's about tenderness. And then all of a sudden, the demon realizes, okay, this guy's a chump, and he moves in. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a little Easter egg. When Shaun is standing back, his hair has got two horns. The hair looks like horns because he's scared. But when he sits down, the horns are bent down. The hair horns are bent down. And that was a touch that Shaun put in there, because now he realizes I don't need to be up. I have
nothing to be afraid of.
I have nothing to be afraid of. And so the power of the church, we tried to make it obvious that if they had stayed with the power of the church, he would have been rebuked.
If the church doesn't bring its authority, it's powerless.
Right.
And so it's really about, he came in, his priesthood was more of a cultural statement than a theological or spiritual one. And by virtue of him not willing to press forward in the name of Christ to confront this evil, by just sort of, dismissing it, well, then the evil continues on its merry way.
And the scarf that he was wearing didn't hurt either.
Yeah. That was a perfect wardrobe choice there.
Yeah. We all know what that means.
Right. Well, there are so many quotable moments in the film, but one of the quotes I wrote down in my notes, and this is Nefarious speaking, he made you in his image, but we remade you in ours. Just comment on that. Like that's just such a pivotal kind of horrifying moment in the film where you can't help but go, oh my gosh, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, because he talks about it after the psychiatrist challenges him to prove he's a demon, and he starts with his sort of the grand cosmology from pre-physical creation and how it worked. And the demon talks about the jealousy for human beings, and then his master, as he refers to the adversary, realizing that if he could corrupt humanity that would punish, in his mind, punish God by destroying what he loved. And so, yeah, that's how, and that's his ultimate statement there. He made you in his image. We remade you in ours. So when you embrace sin, you become more like us than like him. And
I mean, ultimately, that's what the devil does. He does everything in reverse. So 3:00 is the hour of power for the Lord, the day he died. And 3:00 in the morning, like you were saying earlier, is the devil's hour. Everything is in reverse. Everything is in mockery. So if God creates something, the devil destroys that creation. You're seeing that all over society now. God creates man and woman. What does the devil do? Every single issue, every single evil in the world comes back to the devil trying to undo what God has done or mock it and destroy it.
The great irony in this film is I think there's more direct quotes from scripture or riffs on scripture, sometimes turning it backwards because the demon is preaching the gospel from the other side of the mirror. There's more direct scripture in here than any film we've ever done, including God's Not Dead. It just kind of sails by because it's not about embracing it from his standpoint. It's about confronting it and trying to tear it down.
But I want to say also, when you see the poster, you think, oh my goodness, this is one of those demonic satanic movies. I wouldn't go to see this movie if it wasn't my movie, because I'd look at the poster. That's not for me. But I want your audience to know that is not the case. You can tell them there's no demonic or satanic, no one's walking on the ceiling with their heads turning around and spitting out birds and stuff like that. There's no F-bombs. There's no bad language. We didn't need it.
Here's
no
the
sex.
Secret. The poster is a Trojan horse, and it's designed to pull the horror audience in. That's exactly what
because
it's
those are the
to
people that need to see this movie. Theoretically, Christians should know this already. Sadly, I don't believe all of them remember it. I mean, the bottom line is there is a devil, there is an adversary, there is a God, and you're watching this play out. I mean, you're literally watching this play out. And that's why a lot of people have said to us, this is the most original movie I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like this before. C.S. Lewis meets Silence of the Lambs. Screwtape Letters meets Silence of the Lambs.
And ironically, this is the movie so many Christians have been asking us for the last 10 years because they're like, I can't get my friends to go to God's Not Dead, okay? I can't take them to a movie that looks like they're going to be preached at. What I need is mainstream entertainment, and then don't make them feel like they're getting a sermon, but open up, allow it, put whatever stories in there that we can have a conversation afterwards. That's exactly what this movie does.
So the world perceives that this is not a Christian movie. Every word of this is Christian.
Right.
Okay, but they don't pick that up because they're so fallen away. They don't know, but that's the magic of it. We don't have to beat people with it over their head. So I think, God willing, that we've accomplished our goal.
We had one, I don't know if I'm allowed to I won't attribute this because I'm not sure if he wanted it said, but one exec who was at our premiere, he said, this movie is, and he was really excited, he said, this movie is the equivalent of a theological drive-by shooting in a good way. And that was, you go in and you don't realize it, and all of a sudden, bam, you're confronted.
Yeah, that's a theological drive-by shooting. That's a great way to describe it because, again, going through the film twice, I'm like, there's so much good teaching and theology, and there's like this dialogue is so solid. That really is a fun way to describe it. And I can vouch for that you're not going to see the typical horror stuff that you're used to in demonic films. There's no occult representation. There's no puking up green pea soup or head spinning around. I mean, it's dark, but again, so much of it takes place is just that exchange between the two main characters. And honestly, probably the best representation of a demonic manifestation on film. And I've watched quite a few films in kind of more of the horror genre in this space. And this is, 100 times better than anything I've ever seen. Talk to us a little bit about some of the social issues you take on kind of in that as Nefarious is breaking Dr. Martin down. And I don't want to give away too much of the story, but you take on euthanasia, you take on abortion. Talk to us about why you chose to fit that into this dialogue. Obviously, it's a key part of the story, but you're implying kind of a demonic root in those horrors that we see taking place in the world today.
Well, again, I mean, sin is the devil, right? I mean, that's what he does, and the world is burdened with sin. I would defy any of your audience to say to me right now that they don't feel a darkness when they walk out their front door every morning. There's something wrong in the world right now, and I believe it's that the devil knows his time is short, so he's going for the gold here. He's got to go, and that's why we have this insane craziness in America and around the world, where people are talking about these horrific things. So we felt that we would address some of that and point it out. Is abortion murder? Unless you're not paying attention, Of course it's murder. Euthanasia, okay? It's inappropriate. It's murder. I mean, when we talk about the sex trafficking, how can we have 40 million people in the world today, which is supposedly understanding and loving and kind and, and all these things? How can you have 40 million people in sex traffic, being sex trafficked, most of which are children? It's impossible. This is evil that's going on. That was the goal of bringing up all this stuff, to enlighten them. Coming out of the irony is, if a priest or a pastor, if we put a priest or a pastor in that role across from him, no one would pay attention. That's how far the world has fallen. But we put in an atheist psychiatrist, and the devil is literally preaching the gospel here, but in the evil way. So it's very powerful.
He's gloating and he's showboating, and he's telling the truth from his side. From his perception, he's telling the truth most of the time. Sometimes he fabricates or exaggerates, but he's mostly telling the truth from his point of view, because in the story it serves his purpose.
And in terms of the moviegoer takeaway, I mean, I kind of see a couple different audiences. On the one hand, this doesn't read like a typical Christian film or view like a typical Christian film, but yet there's a message for the believer and the Christian that they need to get from this. But also, you're going to attract non-believers as well. And maybe the takeaway from your perspective is the same for both audiences. What is it that you want people to impact? What are they feeling when they walk out of the theater?
For believers at a certain level, it's scared straight. For Christians, I think.
Tough love.
A reminder that hell exists and the demons exist. For the non-believers, I think they're confronted, and we're seeing this over and over again. They're thinking about it days later, and they're actually, for the first time in their lives, questioning, is there a personal source of evil? And to borrow again from C.S. Lewis, that's dangerous for non-believers, because once you accept that there are demons, fallen angels, then you start thinking, well, there are angels that didn't fall, and then you realize that there's a benevolent creator who created both of them, who's actually in charge of the whole deal. And just an admission that demons exist can sort of back you into acceptance of the existence of God.
Additionally, I think, of course, you want people to enjoy the movie, but it's really, like I said before, this is our ministry. This is our work. We want people to go in there, never be bored. That was our one rule. If we lose them for 5 seconds, we'll never get them back. So we want them to go in there and just be totally immersed in the experience. And seemingly, it's the reactions we're getting. We haven't gotten one person, and this is impossible after thousands of people. We haven't had one person complain or say, I didn't like it or anything like that. They're all compelled, some more than others. But we want to basically erupt in people and let them know, look, there's a battle going on, like we say in the movie, for your soul. You just don't realize it. And that's the secret of evil. You don't realize you're in this battle. And so slowly but surely you get pulled into the darkness. Pay attention, wake up. It's a trumpet call. It's a clarion call for good to rise again. And for the Christian and for the non-believer, to make them realize, I've got to really think about this. Maybe I have to change my life.
And the film drops in theaters this Friday, April 14th. If folks who are listening or watching want to find out more, get tickets, where do we go on the web?
whoisnefarious.com or nefariostickets.com or Fandango or any of the movie theaters, anywhere you get a normal movie. We're nationwide.
And we'll make it easy. Like we do with every episode, we'll have links in the show notes to places where you can watch the trailer, pick up tickets. You can go out and see the movie with your friends and family this weekend. Again, thanks so much for being part of this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show. Our guests today, Cary Solomon and Chuck Konzelman, and we were talking about the brand new film, Nefarious. You want to get out and see it. If, like we said, if you're a believer, you're going to be blown away, and you're probably going to think, I remember reading the Screw Tape Letters as a kid or as a teenager, and oh my gosh, I just saw that kind of erupt on film. If you've got non-believing friends, this story is going to impact them and make them wrestle with some of their worldview, at least a little bit. Guys, thank you so much for a phenomenal interview. Fantastic film. Such an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you, Shaun.